Hey everyone, welcome to another week of MicroChurch. We're so glad you made it out. This past Sunday, we talked and continued our series on Acts about becoming a church between the plus signs. We made an observation that for the first 4 weeks of our series, we see the early church devoting themselves to the apostles' teaching, fellowship, breaking bread, and prayer. Now scripture follows that with, and awe came upon every soul. This is the first time we in our theme text, Acts 2, 41 through 47, have encountered something that wasn't necessarily devoted to. Awe coming upon every soul was a result of witnessing the move of God. We also looked into the original language and we found that the word awe in the original language was phobos, and that phobos means fear. Fear came upon every soul. Now, fear is often used interchangeably with awe, especially in today's Christian context. Fear is something that we have learned to reject and cast out. 1 John 4:18 says that perfect love casts out fear. So maybe the fear that came upon the early church was simply awe. But looking into it more, we saw that scripture clearly says that the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. So maybe the fear that we cast out is one that gives us a false view of God. And the fear of the Lord, I'm suggesting, is one that leads us to obedience and submission. Philippians 2:12 says that we need to obey and work out our salvation with fear and trembling. The fear that came upon the early church was one that reminded them of the reality of who God is. It was a fear that is the beginning of wisdom, bringing them to a place completely undone by God's glory, majesty, and power, revealing the obedience that God called them to. I talked about the stories of Nadab and Abihu, how they were commanded consumed by the fire of God because of unauthorized fire they offered to God. Then we looked at the story of Uzzah, a man called to transport the Ark of the Covenant, which was the very presence of God. The one command God gave him was not to touch it, lest he would die. Seeing the ark was going to fall over, he touches it to keep it from falling, and guess what? Uzzah died on the spot. The last story was of Isaiah encountering the Lord's presence in the temple. The train of the Lord's robe filled the temple, and there were seraphim flying in the presence of God, worshiping him. It led Isaiah to say, "Woe is me, for I am undone. I am a man with unclean lips." Maybe some of us today have blurred the lines of obeying and fearing the Lord, causing ourselves to justify any way of living and depending on God's grace for it. Maybe we've found ourselves at one point revering God enough to see that He is enough, but not enough to change my habits and the way I carry myself on this earth. The fear of the Lord is our standard of discipline, and discipline gives us the tools to live in obedience. As opposed to fear leading to condemnation, the fear of the Lord leads us to a place so undone where we are willing to be like Isaiah when God asks, "Who shall he send? Send me, I'll go." I believe that the fear that came upon the early church was one that caused them to work out their salvation with fear and trembling, because knowing who God is increases the perspective of the gospel. A God like that sent his son for an unworthy sinner like me? How much love is that? And he wants me to carry his presence and love to those around me? It leaves me with one response: send me, I'll go.